My name is Eleanor, I'm 64, and the night I noticed someone tiptoeing out of my house, I felt my stomach drop. That moment, that split second when I realized something was terribly, horribly wrong in my own home, that's when everything I thought I knew about my life started crumbling. I'm going to tell you what happened next, and I promise you, by the time I'm done, you'll understand why I had to pretend I was traveling just to save myself from my own family. What I witnessed in the following days made me question everything, every conversation, every kindness, every moment of trust I'd given so freely for months. You're going to want to hear this through to the end, because by midnight that night, I finally saw what they'd been hiding from me, and my whole chest tightened like someone was squeezing my heart in their fist. This is the hardest story I've ever told, and God knows I've lived through plenty. But what my own son did to me, what he planned to do, it's something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Stay with me, because you need to know how far people will go when they think you're too old and too trusting to fight back. Let me start by telling you about this house. Every board, every nail, every coat of paint, my husband Robert and I built this place together over 40 years ago. We picked out the lot on Maple Street because it had the perfect view of the sunrise from what would become our bedroom window. Robert would joke that he wanted to wake up to something beautiful every morning, and then he'd wink at me like I was that something beautiful. We planted the oak tree in the front yard the day we moved in. Our son Michael took his first steps in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room. This house holds every important moment of my life. First words, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, quiet Sunday afternoons when Robert would read the paper while I worked in my garden. When Robert passed 3 years ago, the silence in this house nearly killed me. 42 years of marriage, and suddenly I was eating dinner alone, watching television alone, going to bed in a room that felt enormous and empty. The grief was suffocating. Some nights I'd wake up and reach for him, forgetting for just a moment that he was gone, and the realization would hit me like a punch to the stomach all over again. That's when Michael suggested he and his wife Audrey move in with me. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table where I'd served him countless meals as a boy, "you shouldn't be alone in this big house. Let us help you. Let us be here for you." His eyes were so sincere, so full of concern. I remember feeling this overwhelming relief that I wouldn't have to face the loneliness anymore. My son wanted to take care of me, to be there for his grieving mother. It felt like a blessing. Those first few weeks were beautiful. Audrey would make coffee in the mornings, and we'd sit together talking about her job at the bank. Michael would fix little things around the house that Robert used to handle, a squeaky door, a loose faucet handle. We'd watch movies together in the evenings, and for the first time since Robert died, I felt like I was part of a family again. I wasn't just a widow rattling around in an empty house. I was a mother and mother-in-law, needed and loved and important. Michael would tell me stories about his day at the insurance office, and I'd cook his favorite meals, the same pot roast and mashed potatoes I'd made for him as a child. Audrey would brush my hair sometimes in the evenings while we watched our shows, and I felt cherished, protected. When I'd have one of those crying spells that grief brings on without warning, they'd both comfort me, hold me, tell me it was going to be okay. They made me feel like Robert's death hadn't left me completely alone in the world. But slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice at first, things started to change. It began with hushed conversations that would stop the moment I walked into a room. Michael and Audrey would be talking in low, urgent voices in the kitchen, but the second they heard my footsteps, they'd switch to discussing the weather or what to have for dinner. The atmosphere would shift so quickly it gave me whiplash. One minute they'd be deep in some intense discussion, and the next they'd be smiling at me with these bright, fake expressions that didn't reach their eyes. Then there were the phones. I'd walk into the living room and catch one of them on a call, speaking in that same hushed tone, but they'd quickly say goodbye and hang up when they saw me. "Who is that?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light and curious, not suspicious. "Oh, just work," they'd say, or "nobody important." But their body language screamed that it was very important indeed. They'd slip their phones into their pockets quickly, like they were hiding evidence. The worst part was how the warmth started draining out of our interactions. Those comfortable evening conversations became stilted and brief. When I'd try to share something about my day or ask about theirs, they'd give me these distracted, impatient responses. Michael would check his phone constantly during dinner, and Audrey would find excuses to leave the room when I wanted to talk. I started feeling like an intruder in my own home, like I was interrupting something important just by existing in my own space. Then came the boundaries that made no sense. The spare bedroom at the end of the hall, the one we'd always used for storage, and Michael's old model airplane collection, suddenly became off-limits. "We're reorganizing some things in there, Mom," Audrey explained when I tried to go in to get my old sewing machine. "It's kind of a mess right now. Better to just keep it closed for a while." When I offered to help with whatever reorganizing they were doing, they both quickly insisted it wasn't necessary, that they had it handled. But that room was never quiet. I'd hear movement in there at odd hours, footsteps, shuffling sounds, what sounded like furniture being moved around. When I asked about the noise, they'd look at each other with these quick, meaningful glances before telling me it was nothing, maybe the house settling, or perhaps I was hearing sounds from outside. They made me feel like I was imagining things, like my ears weren't working properly anymore. The nighttime sounds got worse. I'd lie in bed and hear footsteps in the hallway, but they weren't Michael's heavy stride or Audrey's lighter step. These were different footsteps. Sometimes multiple sets of them. I'd hear whispered voices, doors opening and closing, the creak of floorboards in parts of the house where no one should have been walking. When I'd get up to investigate, everything would be quiet and dark. Michael and Audrey's bedroom door would be closed, and I'd convince myself I'd been dreaming. But I wasn't dreaming. I know the sounds of my own house like I know my own heartbeat. I've lived here for decades, and I know which stairs creak, which doors squeak, which floorboards groan when you step on them. These weren't normal house sounds. These were people moving around my house in the middle of the night, trying to be quiet and failing. The tension in the house became so thick you could cut it with a knife. Michael and Audrey would exchange these loaded looks when they thought I wasn't watching, communicate in some silent language I wasn't part of. They'd have sudden, urgent errands that took them both out of the house for hours at a time. When I'd ask where they'd gone, they'd give me vague answers about grocery shopping or visiting friends, but they'd never have groceries with them when they returned. I started noticing other things too. Bills that used to come to the house weren't arriving anymore. When I asked Michael about it, he said he'd set up online bill pay to help me out, that I didn't need to worry about those things anymore. "We're taking care of everything, Mom. You just focus on resting and enjoying your retirement." But something about the way he said it felt condescending, like he was talking to a child instead of the woman who'd raised him and managed a household for 40 years. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong, but every time I tried to bring up my concerns, they dismissed them so smoothly, so reasonably, that I'd end up doubting myself. They'd remind me that grief can make people paranoid, that it was natural for me to feel confused and suspicious after losing Robert. They'd speak to me in these gentle, patient voices that made me feel foolish for questioning anything. But I wasn't foolish, and I wasn't paranoid. I was a woman who'd raised a family, run a household, and dealt with crisis after crisis throughout my life. I knew when something was wrong in my own home. The problem was, I didn't know what to do about it. These were the people I trusted most in the world, the people I'd invited to live with me, to care for me. How do you confront the people you depend on when you suspect they're lying to you? That's when I decided to talk to Mr. Lawson. Harold Lawson has lived across the street from us for 30 years. He and his wife Margaret were close friends with Robert and me, and after Margaret passed 5 years ago, he'd become even more of a fixture in our lives. He's the kind of neighbor who notices everything not in a nosy way, but in a caring, watchful way. If anyone would know if something strange was happening at my house, it would be Harold. I waited until Michael and Audrey were both out on one of their mysterious errands, then walked across the street and knocked on Harold's door. He invited me in for coffee, and we sat in his kitchen that looks directly across to my house. I felt nervous bringing up my suspicions, worried he'd think I was becoming a paranoid old woman, but I had to know if what I was sensing was real. "Harold," I said, stirring my coffee and trying to keep my voice casual, "have you noticed anything unusual about my house lately? Any strange cars or people coming and going?" The way his expression changed told me everything I needed to know. His face got serious, almost troubled, and he set down his coffee cup with a heavy sigh. "Eleanor," he said, "I've been wondering when you'd ask me about that." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" "I didn't want to interfere or cause problems between you and your family," he said, looking uncomfortable. "But yes, I've noticed things. Strange cars in your driveway at odd hours. People I don't recognize going in and out of your house, usually late at night. Sometimes they're carrying bags or suitcases. Last week I saw a man I'd never seen before loading something heavy into a car parked in your driveway at 2 in the morning. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet." "How long has this been going on?" "A few months now," he admitted. "At first I thought maybe you were having guests or Michael and Audrey had friends staying over. But these aren't social visits, Eleanor. These people come and go quickly, like they don't want to be seen. And they're always dealing with Audrey or Michael directly. I've never seen you interact with any of them." The confirmation that my instincts were right should have been validating, but instead it filled me with dread. If Harold had been seeing strange people at my house for months, and I had no idea who they were or why they were there, then my own family was actively hiding something significant from me. Something that required secrecy and happened under cover of darkness. "Harold," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I think my son and daughter-in-law are doing something in my house without my knowledge or permission. I don't know what it is, but I'm scared." He reached across the table and patted my hand. "What do you want to do about it?" That's when the plan started forming in my mind. If I couldn't get the truth by asking direct questions, I'd have to find another way to discover what was really happening in my own home. I'd have to catch them in the act of whatever they were doing. And to do that, I'd need them to think I wasn't there to see it. "Harold," I said, "how would you feel about helping me do some detective work?" The next morning, I announced to Michael and Audrey that I'd decided to visit my sister Linda in Phoenix. I made sure to sound excited about it, talking about how much I'd missed Linda and how the warm weather would do me good. I called the airline reservation number while they were in the room, making a big show of booking a flight for that Friday and returning the following Wednesday. I even asked Audrey to drive me to the mall to buy a new suitcase, since my old one was looking tired. They seemed almost relieved when I told them about the trip. Michael smiled wider than I'd seen him smile in weeks. "That sounds wonderful, Mom. You deserve a break. Some time with Linda will be good for you." Audrey chimed in enthusiastically, offering to help me pack and making suggestions about what I should bring. Their eagerness for me to leave should have hurt my feelings, but instead it confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. They wanted me out of the house for a reason. I spent the week leading up to my supposed departure playing the role of an excited traveler. I talked about my plans, made lists of things I wanted to do in Phoenix, even called Linda to tell her about my trip. Though I swore her to secrecy about the real plan. Linda thought I was losing my mind at first, but when I explained everything I'd been noticing and what Harold had seen, she became my co-conspirator. "You be careful, Eleanor," she said. "And you call me the minute you find out what's going on." Friday morning arrived, and I put on my best performance. I hugged Michael and Audrey goodbye, thanked them for taking such good care of me, and reminded them to water my plants while I was gone. Michael loaded my suitcase into his car and drove me to the airport, just like a devoted son would. At the airport, I made sure he saw me go through security with my boarding pass before he left. But instead of getting on a plane to Phoenix, I caught a taxi back to Harold's house. Harold had prepared the spare bedroom for me and positioned a comfortable chair by the upstairs window that had a perfect view of my house. We'd synchronized our watches and planned out how we'd document anything we observed. Harold even borrowed a camera with a good zoom lens from his nephew. We felt like spies, which would have been fun under different circumstances. That first night, nothing happened. I sat by Harold's window from sunset until well past midnight, watching my own house like it was a suspect's hideout in a detective movie. The house stayed dark and quiet, and I started to wonder if I'd been imagining everything. Maybe the strange noises really were just the house settling. Maybe the hushed conversations really were about innocent things. Maybe grief had made me paranoid after all. But Saturday night was different. At around 9 o'clock, a car I'd never seen before pulled into my driveway. Two people got out, a man and a woman I didn't recognize, and they both carried overnight bags. Audrey met them at the front door like she'd been expecting them. Even from across the street, I could see her pocket something that looked like cash before leading them inside. My hands were shaking as I watched lights turn on in rooms throughout my house. The off-limits spare bedroom lit up first, then the guest bathroom, then Robert's old office that we'd converted into a storage room. Within an hour, I counted lights in at least 4 different rooms, including the basement. My house looked like a hotel, with strangers moving around inside it like they belonged there. "Harold," I whispered, "are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," he confirmed grimly. "And I'm taking pictures." Over the next few hours, more cars arrived. By midnight, I'd counted at least 6 vehicles parked in my driveway and on the street in front of my house. People were coming and going like it was some kind of business operation. Some stayed for hours, others for just 30 or 40 minutes. All of them were greeted by either Michael or Audrey, and all of them handed over money. I felt sick. My son was running some kind of illegal rental operation out of my house, using my home like it was his personal business property. These weren't friends staying over or family members in need of a place to crash. These were paying customers, and I was the homeowner who had no idea what was happening under my own roof. "They're running a damn hotel," I said to Harold, my voice tight with anger and disbelief. "Looks like it," he agreed. "And from the way people are coming and going at all hours, I'd guess they're charging by the hour, not by the night." The implications of that hit me like a physical blow. Not only were they using my house without permission, they were potentially running some kind of short-term rental business that could be bringing all kinds of strangers into my home. People I'd never met, never approved of, never consented to having in my space. People who could be using my bathroom, sleeping in my beds, going through my belongings. But the worst part was the betrayal. My son, the boy I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, was stealing from me in the cruelest way possible. He was stealing my home, my trust, my sense of safety. He was treating me like I was too old or too stupid to notice what was happening in my own house. I sat in that chair until dawn, documenting every arrival and departure, every exchange of money, every light that turned on and off. Harold made us some coffee around 4 in the morning, and we sat together in horrified silence, watching my home be used as a business I'd never authorized. When the last stranger left at around 6 in the morning, I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me an empty shell. But I also felt something else rising up in me. A cold, hard anger that I hadn't felt since I was a young mother protecting my child from neighborhood bullies. Someone was taking advantage of me, treating me like I was helpless and weak. And I'll be damned if I was going to let that stand. "Harold," I said as we watched Michael close the front door behind the last customer, "I need to get into my house. I need to find evidence of what they're doing." Sunday morning, while Michael and Audrey were at church, still playing their parts as devoted, helpful family members, I let myself into my own backyard through the gate I've used for 40 years. Everything looked normal from the outside. but I knew that was intentional. The real evidence would be hidden where they thought I'd never look. I started with the shed in my backyard, the one where Robert used to keep his gardening tools and lawnmower. It had been years since I'd gone in there, especially since Michael had taken over all the yard work. The door was locked, which was strange because we'd never locked the shed before. But I still had the spare key hanging on its nail inside the garage. What I found in that shed nearly knocked me to my knees. Stacked on Robert's old workbench were bundles of cash held together with rubber bands. More money than I'd seen in one place in my entire life. 20s, 50s, hundreds, just sitting there like it was normal to keep thousands of dollars in a backyard shed. Beside the money were manila folders full of papers, and when I opened them, I felt like I might be sick. The first folder contained printed emails and text messages between Michael and various people discussing rates for rooms in my house. $20 for 2 hours, $50 for 4 hours, $100 for overnight stays. They were marketing different rooms at different prices. The master bedroom was premium pricing. The basement was budget rates. My home had been turned into an hourly rental business, and my son was the manager. But that wasn't even the worst part. The second folder contained medical records and legal documents that made my blood run cold. There were notes from a doctor I'd never heard of, discussing my supposed declining cognitive function and memory issues. According to these fabricated medical reports, I was showing signs of dementia and becoming unable to manage my own affairs. The third folder was the one that broke something inside me. It contained a power of attorney document that was almost completed, with my name typed in and signature lines waiting to be filled. There were notes in Audrey's handwriting about when to administer the sedative and how to get her to sign during her confused state. They were planning to drug me and trick me into signing over legal control of my life and my property. I sat in that shed, holding evidence of my son's plan to steal everything from me, and I felt a rage so pure and complete it scared me. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about my dignity, my autonomy, my right to control my own life. They were planning to have me declared incompetent so they could take over everything Robert and I had built together. They weren't just stealing my house. They were planning to steal my whole life. I carefully photographed every document with my phone, put everything back exactly where I'd found it, and locked the shed behind me. Then I walked straight to my car and drove to the office of Patricia Martinez, the lawyer who'd handled Robert's will and had been our family attorney for 20 years. Patricia listened to my story with increasing alarm, stopping me several times to ask for clarification about dates and details. When I showed her the photographs of the documents from the shed, her face went white with anger. "Eleanor," she said, "what your son is planning constitutes elder abuse, financial fraud, and potentially criminal conspiracy. The fake medical evaluation alone could put him in prison for several years. What can we do to stop them?" I asked. "We're going to protect you first," she said, immediately pulling out legal forms. "I'm going to prepare documents that explicitly revoke any power of attorney authorizations Michael might try to claim, even if he gets you to sign something under duress. We're also going to notify the court system that there are concerns about potential elder abuse, which will flag any attempts to have you declared incompetent." But Patricia's next suggestion was what really appealed to the part of me that was burning with righteous fury. "If you really want to catch them red-handed," she said, "I can arrange for an official inspection of your property. The city has the right to investigate illegal business operations, especially when there are concerns about safety code violations. If we time it right, we can catch them in the act with official witnesses." That's how we set the trap. Patricia contacted a friend of hers who worked for the city's code enforcement department, explaining the situation and requesting an inspection for suspected illegal rental operations. We scheduled it for Tuesday night, a time when Harold had observed particularly heavy traffic at my house during previous weeks. Tuesday afternoon, I called Michael from Harold's house, staying in character as a tourist enjoying Phoenix. I told him I was having a wonderful time with Linda, that we'd been shopping and sightseeing, and that I missed him and Audrey. I made sure to mention that I'd be getting home Wednesday evening as planned, just to confirm that he still thought he had the house to himself that night. "Have a great last day, Mom," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We'll be here when you get home." The audacity of it made me want to scream. He was standing in my kitchen, probably counting the money he'd made off my house, telling me how much he was looking forward to my return while planning to drug me and steal my life. Harold and I took our positions at his upstairs window as darkness fell. Right on schedule, the first car arrived at 8:30, then another at 9. By 10 o'clock, there were 5 cars parked around my house, and lights were blazing in every room. My home looked like a busy hotel, with people coming and going through my front door like they owned the place. At exactly 10:45, a white city vehicle pulled up to my house. Patricia's friend Jake Martinez, no relation, despite the same last name, got out wearing an official city inspector jacket. He was accompanied by a police officer, since suspected illegal business operations sometimes require law enforcement presence. They walked up to my front door and knocked. I watched through Harold's window as Audrey answered the door, and even from across the street, I could see her face go pale when she saw the official badges. There was a brief conversation, then Jake and the officer were allowed inside. Within minutes, people started streaming out of my house like ants from a disturbed nest. But I wasn't done yet. At 11 o'clock, while Jake was still inside documenting the illegal rental operation, I walked across the street to my own front door and let myself in with my key. The look on Michael's face when he saw me standing in my own entryway was something I'll never forget. Pure terror, followed by confusion, followed by a desperate attempt to look innocent and surprised. "Mom," he said, his voice pitched too high. "What are you doing here? I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." "I live here," I said, my voice so cold it could have frozen water. "The question is, what are all these strangers doing in my house?" Audrey appeared behind him, her face flushed and panicked. "Eleanor, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I said, gesturing toward Jake, who was photographing the rooms full of people and belongings that didn't belong to any of us. "Because it looks like you've been running an illegal hotel out of my house while lying to me about it for months." That's when Jake stepped forward and introduced himself, explaining that he was conducting an official investigation into illegal rental operations. He asked me directly if I had given permission for my home to be used as a short-term rental business, if I had knowledge of the financial transactions taking place, and if I was aware that strangers had been staying in my house regularly. "Absolutely not," I answered clearly, making sure everyone in the room could hear me. "I never gave permission for any of this. I had no idea strangers were staying in my house. I never authorized my son to run a business out of my home." The remaining guests were escorted out, and Jake continued his documentation while the police officer took statements. Michael kept trying to explain, claiming he'd been planning to tell me, saying he thought I'd be okay with it, insisting he was only trying to help with expenses. But every word that came out of his mouth just made him sound more guilty. Audrey, meanwhile, had gone completely silent, standing with her arms crossed and a look of pure hatred on her face. Not embarrassment, not regret, hatred. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong by catching them. When Jake and the officer finished their work and left, it was just the 3 of us standing in my living room. The house felt violated and wrong, like it would never be clean again after having all those strangers in it. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Michael looked at his feet. "A few months." "How long, Michael?" I repeated. "Since about a month after we moved in," he admitted. "So almost from the beginning. Almost from the moment I'd invited them into my home to comfort me in my grief, they'd been planning to take advantage of me. They'd let me feel grateful for their presence while secretly turning my house into their personal business. And the medical records? I asked. The power of attorney documents? Were you planning to tell me about those too? The way his head snapped up, the pure shock on his face, told me he hadn't expected me to know about those. He looked at Audrey with panic in his eyes, and she looked back at him with an expression that clearly said he was on his own. I can explain that, he started, but I cut him off. Can you explain planning to have me declared incompetent? Can you explain forging medical records to make me look like I have dementia? Can you explain planning to drug me and trick me into signing legal documents? Mom, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I exploded, all the rage I'd been holding back finally erupting. You moved into my house pretending to care about me, and from day one you were planning to steal everything from me. You turned my home into a business without my knowledge, you planned to have me declared mentally incompetent, and you were going to drug me to get me to sign away my rights. Michael started crying then, big gasping sobs that might have moved me if I hadn't seen all the evidence of his betrayal. I lost my job, Mom. We were in so much debt. Audrey said we could make enough money to get back on our feet, and then we'd stop. Don't you dare blame this on Audrey, I said, though I had no love for her either. You're a grown man who made the choice to steal from his mother instead of asking for help. You made the choice to lie to me every single day for months. You made the choice to plan to drug me and steal my life. Audrey finally spoke up, and when she did, her voice was full of venom. You act like you're some victim, but you're just a selfish old woman who hoards money while her family struggles. We were taking care of you, giving up our freedom to live in this house with you, and you never even offered to help us financially. The twisted logic of it took my breath away. I gave you a place to live rent-free. I fed you, I welcomed you into my home when you had nowhere else to go, and you repaid me by stealing from me. We were earning money from space you weren't even using, she continued. You have this huge house, and you just rattle around in it by yourself. At least we were making it productive. It's my house, I screamed. Mine. I didn't give you permission to make it productive. I didn't ask you to turn it into a hotel. You stole from me every single day, and you made me feel crazy for noticing that something was wrong. Michael was still crying, but Audrey just stood there with that hateful look on her face, completely unrepentant. She truly believed that they'd been justified in what they'd done, that my grief and loneliness had somehow given them the right to take advantage of me. I want you both out of my house, I said, my voice steady now. I want you packed and gone by Friday. Mom, please, Michael begged. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from me, I replied. You should have thought about that before you planned to have me declared incompetent. You should have thought about that before you turned my home into a crime scene. They tried to argue, tried to negotiate, tried to make me feel guilty for throwing them out. Michael played the role of the repentant son, promising to make it right, swearing he'd never meant for it to go so far. Audrey alternated between tearful apologies and angry justifications, claiming they'd been planning to tell me everything eventually. But I was done. 40 years of marriage had taught me to recognize real remorse from manipulative performance, and what I was seeing from both of them was pure manipulation. They weren't sorry for what they'd done, they were sorry they'd been caught. Friday morning, I stood in my driveway and watched them load their belongings into a rented truck. They'd barely spoken to me since Tuesday night, communicating only when necessary to coordinate the logistics of their departure. Michael looked broken, defeated, like a man who'd gambled everything and lost. Audrey looked furious, shooting me venomous glances when she thought I wasn't looking. As they prepared to drive away, Michael walked over to me one last time. Mom, he said, I know you hate me right now, but I want you to know that I love you. I never meant for any of this to hurt you. I looked at my son, this man I'd given birth to, raised, loved unconditionally for 40 years, and felt nothing but emptiness where my maternal affection used to be. Michael, I said, love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't plan to drug someone and take away their freedom. I don't know what you think love is, but what you did to me isn't it?" He nodded, tears streaming down his face, and got into the truck without another word. I watched them drive away and felt a profound relief mixed with a grief so deep I thought it might swallow me whole. The house felt enormous and quiet after they left. I walked through every room, seeing it with new eyes now that I knew what had been happening in each space. The spare bedroom that had been off-limits was full of evidence of strangers, different toiletries in the attached bathroom, unfamiliar clothes forgotten in the closet, sheets that smelled like people I'd never met. The basement had been converted into a sleeping area with an air mattress and temporary furniture. Even my own bedroom showed signs of use by people who had no right to be there. I spent the next week in a state of shocked numbness, trying to process the magnitude of what had been done to me. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I struggled to trust my own judgment about anything. If I could be so thoroughly deceived by my own son, how could I trust myself to make any decisions about my life? Patricia helped me work through the legal ramifications of everything we'd discovered. The evidence was more than enough to pursue criminal charges against both Michael and Audrey, as well as the corrupt doctor who'd been willing to falsify medical records for money. The power of attorney fraud alone was a felony that could result in significant prison time. "The choice is yours, Eleanor," Patricia explained during one of our meetings. "You have every right to pursue criminal prosecution. What they did constitutes elder abuse, financial fraud, conspiracy, and several other serious crimes. They could both spend years in prison." I sat in her office, staring out the window, trying to decide what kind of justice I wanted. Part of me, a big part, wanted to see them punished for what they'd done to me. I wanted them to face consequences that matched the magnitude of their betrayal. I wanted the world to know that you can't steal from elderly people and expect to get away with it. But another part of me, the part that had loved Michael since the moment he was born, couldn't bear the thought of sending my son to prison. Despite everything he'd done, despite the calculated cruelty of his plan, he was still the little boy I'd held when he had nightmares, the teenager I'd cheered for at baseball games, the young man I'd danced with at his wedding. What would happen if I chose not to press charges? I asked. They'd still face consequences from the city for the illegal business operation, Patricia explained. There would be fines, and it would go on their record. The doctor who falsified your medical records would face professional sanctions and possibly criminal charges, since medical fraud is taken very seriously. But Michael and Audrey would likely avoid prison time. In the end, I chose a middle path that felt like justice without vengeance. I pursued civil remedies that would ensure I was compensated for the money they'd made off my house and the damage they'd done to my property. I also insisted that the corrupt doctor face the full weight of professional and legal consequences for his willingness to falsify medical records. Medical professionals who prey on elderly people needed to be stopped before they could hurt others. But I didn't send my son to prison. Whether that makes me weak or merciful or just a mother who couldn't fully stop loving her child despite everything, I don't know. It felt like the choice that would let me sleep at night. About a month after they left, I received a letter from Michael. It was postmarked from a town about 3 hours away, written on cheap paper in handwriting that looked shaky and uncertain. "Dear Mom," it began. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I had to try to explain. Audrey and I are separated. She moved back in with her sister, and I'm staying at a motel while I look for work. I lost my job 2 weeks after we left your house. Word got around about what happened, and my boss said he couldn't trust me to handle other people's money anymore. I know you probably think I'm only sorry because I got caught, but that's not true. I've been lying awake every night thinking about what I did to you, and I'm sick with guilt and shame. You raised me better than this. Dad would be disgusted with me. I don't know how I became the kind of person who could steal from his own mother. The plan with the power of attorney wasn't my idea originally, but that doesn't matter because I went along with it. I let Audrey convince me that you wouldn't miss the money, that you'd probably want to help us if you knew how desperate we were. But the truth is, I was too ashamed to ask for help, and too weak to stop Audrey when she suggested stealing. Instead, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed any right I had to call you Mom. But I want you to know that losing you has been worse than losing my job, worse than losing my wife, worse than any of the other consequences. I threw away the most important relationship in my life for money and lies, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back or even write me back. I just wanted you to know that I know how wrong I was and that I'm sorry for hurting you so badly. I love you and I'm sorry. Michael. I read that letter a dozen times, searching for signs of manipulation or false remorse, but it felt genuine in a way that his tearful apologies the night I caught them had not. It felt like the words of someone who'd finally understood the full weight of what he'd lost, not just someone trying to minimize consequences. But I didn't write back. I wasn't ready for that, and I might never be ready for that. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal completely, and some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. Maybe someday I'll be able to have a relationship with my son again, but it won't be the relationship we had before. That version of us died the night I watched strangers walk out of my house with bags full of their belongings. The hardest part of healing wasn't dealing with the legal aftermath or cleaning up the physical evidence of what had been done to my house. The hardest part was learning to trust myself again. For months, Michael and Audrey had made me doubt my own perceptions, my own instincts, my own reality. When I'd noticed strange sounds or suspicious behavior, they'd convinced me I was imagining things, that grief was making me paranoid, that I was becoming confused and unreliable. That kind of psychological manipulation leaves scars that don't show up on the outside. Even now, months later, I sometimes catch myself second-guessing my own judgment about simple things. When I hear an unusual noise in the house, I have a moment of doubt. Am I really hearing something, or am I becoming the confused old woman they tried to convince me I was? But I'm working on it. I've replaced the locks on every door and window. I've had a security system installed that sends alerts to my phone whenever anyone enters the house. I've painted over every wall that those strangers touched, replaced every piece of furniture they used, and deep-cleaned every surface they contaminated with their presence. I converted Robert's old office into an art studio, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. I'm learning to paint watercolors, and while I'm not very good at it yet, there's something deeply satisfying about creating beauty in the space where so much ugliness was planned. The room where they stored forged medical records is now filled with easels and canvases and the kind of natural light that makes everything look hopeful. Harold has become more than a neighbor. He's become one of my closest friends and most trusted allies. We have dinner together twice a week, and he checks on me every day without making me feel like he thinks I'm helpless. He was the one person who believed me when I said something was wrong, and he was brave enough to help me find the truth even when it was dangerous and uncomfortable. I trust Harold's judgment about people now more than I trust my own, and I'm grateful every day that I had someone in my corner when my own family turned against me. I've also started volunteering with an organization that helps elderly people who've been victimized by family members or caregivers. It's more common than people want to believe. Adult children who steal from aging parents, caregivers who isolate elderly people from their support systems, family members who manipulate vulnerable relatives into signing away their rights. My case was more elaborate than most, but the basic pattern of betrayal and exploitation is heartbreakingly familiar. Sharing my story with other survivors has been both painful and healing. Painful because I have to relive the humiliation and betrayal over and over again. Healing because I see how my experience can help other people recognize the warning signs before it's too late, or find the courage to fight back when they're in the middle of being victimized. There's something powerful about turning your worst experience into a tool for helping others. It doesn't erase what happened to me, but it gives meaning to the pain. Every time I help someone else recognize that they're being manipulated or stolen from, every time I help someone find the courage to seek help or fight back, it feels like a small victory against the people who tried to destroy me. I won't lie and say I've completely healed from what Michael and Audrey did to me. Some nights I still lie awake thinking about all the signs I missed, all the times I doubted myself when I should have trusted my instincts. I still have moments of profound sadness when I think about the son I thought I had versus the man who was actually living in my house. I still feel a deep anger that burns in my chest when I think about how they were willing to drug me and steal my autonomy just to get control of my property. But I've also discovered strengths in myself that I didn't know existed. I learned that I could face a terrible truth and take action to protect myself, even when it meant confronting the people I loved most. I learned that I could survive being betrayed by my own child and still find reasons to get up in the morning. I learned that there are good people in the world, like Harold, like Patricia, like the other survivors I work with now, who will stand by you when your own family won't. Most importantly, I learned that being elderly doesn't make you powerless. The people who prey on older adults count on us being too confused, too isolated, or too ashamed to fight back. They count on us accepting their version of reality even when it contradicts everything we know to be true. They count on us being grateful for any attention or care, even when it comes with a terrible price. But we don't have to accept their version of reality. We don't have to be grateful for crumbs of affection mixed with massive helpings of abuse. We don't have to let people steal from us just because they're family, just because they claim to be helping us, just because they make us feel like we should be thankful for any company at all. I am 64 years old. I live alone in the house I built with my husband, and I am not a victim anymore. I am a woman who survived being betrayed by the people who were supposed to love and protect me. I am a woman who found the courage to fight back when everything she valued was under attack. I am a woman who discovered that losing everyone she thought she could trust didn't mean she had to lose herself. They almost took everything from me. They took my sense of safety in my own home, my trust in my own perceptions, my belief that family bonds meant something sacred and unbreakable. They took months of peace and happiness that I can never get back. They took my relationship with my son, probably forever. But they didn't take me. They didn't take my dignity, my independence, or my right to control my own life. They didn't take my ability to help other people, to create beauty, to find new reasons to appreciate each day. They didn't take my capacity to form new relationships based on genuine care and mutual respect rather than manipulation and exploitation. I lost a son that day when I caught them red-handed in my own house. But I found myself again. I found the woman who existed before I became a wife and mother, the woman who had dreams and opinions and the strength to fight for what was right. I found the part of me that had gotten lost in decades of putting other people's needs before my own, of being grateful for any scrap of attention, of doubting my own worth and judgment. Some betrayals cut so deep they change you forever. The betrayal I experienced didn't make me bitter, though it could have. It didn't make me afraid, though it had every right to. It didn't make me give up on humanity, though the temptation was there. Instead, it made me fierce. It made me protective of other vulnerable people. It made me determined to use my voice to warn others and to support those who find themselves in similar situations. It made me appreciate genuine friendship and love in ways I never did when I took them for granted. The night I stood in my driveway watching my son drive away with his belongings, I thought my life was ending. I thought the betrayal would destroy me, that the loneliness would swallow me whole, that I'd never be able to trust anyone again. But my life wasn't ending. It was beginning again, cleaner and more honest than it had been in years. I was no longer living a lie, no longer being manipulated and deceived every single day. For the first time in months, I could trust my own perceptions, believe my own instincts, and make decisions about my life without wondering if someone was working against me in secret. Recovery isn't a straight line, and healing doesn't happen overnight. There are still days when the weight of what happened feels overwhelming. There are still nights when I lie awake thinking about all the ways I could have handled things differently, all the signs I should have noticed sooner. But there are also mornings when I wake up grateful for the silence in my house, grateful that every conversation is honest, grateful that I know exactly who has been in my space and why. There are afternoons when I'm working in my garden or painting in my studio, and I feel genuinely happy for the first time in longer than I care to admit. The woman I am now is stronger than the woman I was before Michael and Audrey moved in. She's more careful about trusting people, but she's also more confident in her own judgment. She's more aware of how manipulation works, but she's also more appreciative of genuine kindness. She's more protective of her independence, but she's also more willing to ask for help when she needs it. This is what surviving looks like. Not bouncing back to who you were before, because that person was naive about what family members could do to each other. Not pretending it didn't happen, because the scars are real and the lessons learned are too valuable to forget. But moving forward with wisdom earned through pain, with strength discovered through necessity, and with a deeper appreciation for authenticity and truth. They tried to steal my life, but they only succeeded in showing me how much I had left to live for. They tried to convince me I was weak and confused, but they only proved how strong and clear-minded I really am. They tried to take away my home, but they only helped me reclaim it as truly mine. Some betrayals cut deepest, but surviving them shows who you really are. And who I really am is a woman who refuses to be a victim, who won't let anyone else write the story of her life, and who discovered that starting over at 64 is not only possible, it's powerful. They didn't take me. And I'm not going anywhere.